You know who it is. This is Kenny Coins with Marathon Money. Make every second count. I'm with David Wolf. Um, actually met him on LinkedIn, and he actually wanted to join our podcast, and I appreciate him decided to come on, taking time out of his busy schedule to do so. But he's a media executive, music producer, entrepreneur. Seems like he's done a lot in the last 30 years. But I'll let him explain himself. So, David, take it.
Hey, Kenny, good to be with you. And yeah, no, you live long enough, and yeah, you do a lot of stuff, right? So I'm uh, I'm in my third career now, I think, maybe second or third career. I did, as you alluded to, I spent a bunch of years initially as a drummer. I grew up in Chicago and played jazz and fusion and rock, and I was a jobbing musician, a session player, and then eventually learned how to compose and produce music for radio, TV, and film. So I learned that business in Chicago and mentored with some people that were really a part of the whole transition from, believe it or not, radio. I'm dating myself, from radio into television, and then I was working with these guys when they were in their late 50s and 60s. So one of the major guys in Chicago that, if anybody is old enough to remember Snap Crackle Pop Rice Krispies, that's the guy that taught me how to do music for radio, television, advertising. So I spent about 5 years with Dick Marks, and Richard Marx's father is who that is. And then I moved to Dallas after we got married in '85 and started my own music production company. So this was the first business I started, Kenny, and it was decidedly not scalable. It was a business that was all about me writing a piece of music. But at that point in my time, I was 25 years old, and all I wanted to do was express myself creatively and make money doing it. That was the kind of combination. So I created the company. I started calling around. I had a demo reel, and gradually I started working on Doritos and Pepsi and McDonald's and Coke and all kinds of brands you've heard of, and learned the business and learned how to write for radio, TV, film, commercials. I worked with filmmakers. I worked on children's programming. You might remember Barney, for better and worse. You might remember Barney the dinosaur. He was kind of a big property now owned by Mattel. I got about 45 songs and this children's catalog. And I also worked on a lot of Chuck E. Cheese stuff, believe it or not. We were producing the tracks that were playing in the pizza restaurants for the international franchise. So it was a terrific. So I had a couple of really big clients, and then a bunch of smaller clients circling around with commercials that were kind of in and out, and it was great. I had about a 15-year run. My wife and I ran the business together. We had freelancers, musicians coming in the studio, singers. We were in Dallas, Texas for that. I think I mentioned that, and a lot of great talent, a lot of great players in Dallas. So learned a lot, did well, had a good run. We made some money. And when I turned 40, I kind of reached a point where I was needing to do something else, with my professional self and explore other things. So this is really where I stepped in from, being a pure musician and creative guy is, okay, I want to know about business. I want to understand business a little bit more. And so my brother and I took us about a $3 million top line business in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and decided to restart it. It had gone bankrupt, and we bought the assets of that company out of bankruptcy and redeployed the brand. It was a well-known regional brand in bagels and breads in Albuquerque and northern New Mexico, Santa Fe included. And so I learned a ton. We had 30 employees. I had to raise money. I worked with a bank. We had an investor, and we grew it to about 1.2 million or so over the course of about 9 years. And I ran it as the CEO, and he really ran the bakery operation. So this is where I kind of stepped out of being like pure creative, and now I'm running a real business. And it was a very rich learning experience. It didn't. The outcome wasn't particularly beneficial from a pure exit standpoint, as they say in the private equity business, right? But I learned a ton, and it set the stage for me to then explore, all right, how do I return this to a business I really understand and know, production, and create a business that can scale like the business we now have, which I probably could say that I started dabbling in podcasting around 2008, 6, 8, somewhere in there. So I was early. And I was doing business interviews, much like the show you did. We did about 300 episodes of Small Biz America. So I had no business model. I had no understanding of the ecosystem. It really hadn't matured yet to the point where it is now, where you've got Spotify and you've got, iHeart and all the different platforms. There wasn't a clear path to monetization. I did get it up on about 75 markets in radio. We had a short format feature that we put out there, but it really didn't make money. It was more just here's what podcasting is. Here's how to do interviews. I learned a lot about business, and I learned a lot about the mechanics of producing podcasts. And that led me into creating Audivita Studios. Ultimately, parallel to the podcast, I was starting to meet publishers in the book space. And so we created a kind of a two-pronged business that we now have about 6 years ago, called Audivita, and we produce about 200 audiobooks a year, and we have about anywhere from 30 to 50 podcasts in production at a given time at our current size. And so that kind of brings us up to where we are now.
Man, long history. Love it. But I do want to start like at the beginning of like your career. It's like I feel like you was at the age where podcast wasn't really, it was more radio. Am I correct?
Yeah.
I feel like back in like 20.
You mean before podcasts were a thing and you had on
Yeah, before
demand streaming anything? Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like back in 2015, 2016, when we started Marathon Money, we was like really the only people out there. And for like in our space, I think a lot of it came down to a lot of people ask us, man, how do you guys get so many listeners? How do you guys get so many traffic on your website? How do you guys get so many people that listen? It's like we've been doing this so long. We did it before there was a TikTok where you can blast your podcast. So we have like a lot of original people that you had to go look for the podcast. There was no way to advertise it. I'm pretty sure it was 10 times harder for you when you started up. But I do want to ask you a question. Like, you spent a decade building a business and a platform around media and voice. What is about the spoken words and storytelling that continues to captivate, inspire you after all these years? Because you're still doing it now, even after leaving.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. So it started from the idea that I wanted to build a business that helps people connect their voice to the world. And that's our tagline. That's been kind of our mantra, our tagline since the beginning. We're about 6 years into the project now. What I set out to do, and I kind of telegraphed this a little bit earlier, Kenny, is that I wanted to create a business that wasn't as reliant on me as writing music for projects. It's not a project business anymore. It's something that can scale to a certain point. So I think the things that keep me going, which I think is the core to your question now, is there's a multi-tiered answer to this. So first of all, somehow miraculously, or not so miraculously, I was able to attract a really good team of people. When I first started, I was doing everything myself. So I'm like in my 50s at that point. This is 6-7 years ago. And I had a VA, and the VA turned into my COO. She wanted to be a permanent part of the business. She closed her VA company and joined me full time, and now is the CEO of the company. So I'm now the founder and president, but I'm no longer operationally involved. So part of what I was setting out to do was a personal, selfish goal of creating a company that didn't rely on me. And so we have that's Erica, our COO. We have Jay, who runs all the business development. We have Mark, who runs the audiobook production team, and Sean, who runs the podcast production team. So I think part of the answer to your question is this business is having an impact on not only the 7 employees we have that are full-time, but also about 30 or 40 freelance producers, editors, audio editors, video editors that work with us to produce the work. And the impact that we're having on that team and those people's lives has become not a side effect, but really a very satisfying part of the fuel that keeps me going emotionally. Now, having said that, in all transparency, I've been exploring. I'm 60. I'll be 65 in December. So you could say, well, I'm that baby boomer that sells their business. I've been exploring. This year, I set out to raise capital to grow. And I created a super structure called Media Capital Ventures, which, you're a PE guy. So I got into this cycle of really studying private equity. Not that we're big enough for that. We're about a $1.3 million company, and so we're too small for private equity really at our current size. But I looked at it as a proxy for how do you raise capital and how do you kind of grow this thing in a different way through acquisition, through organic growth, and just wanted to become a student of that. So I'm coming off about a year of endeavoring in a potential capital raise, angels, family offices. We did make some run at private equity, but again, I discovered and learned a lot in that process. And you're an expert in this area, from what I can tell. So you'll have a
Yeah.
lot to say about that. But
So
yeah. So go ahead, please insert.
yes.
Yeah.
So like I think your best bet is gonna go with family offices.
Yes, that's where I land.
uh,
That's where I
yeah,
landed. But there's more to the story. But go ahead, please.
yeah, your best bets go with family offices if
Yeah.
you want like some type of direction to go, man. I would stay away from PE.
Yeah.
They run a really like tight ship, profit central.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. And
really
with
like
often, yeah,
yeah,
often with an exit strategy that's a very short fuse.
yes,
And
3 to 5 years.
and I'm looking at I want to build a business. I'm thinking like a lot of famous entrepreneurs think 10 years. I mean, I'm too old to be, 75, right? So I have this interesting sort of interplay of most of my team is about 10 years younger than me or more.
Yeah,
And so I'm looking at simultaneously raising capital, but also I've had several conversations with small businesses that want to acquire us. So I'm simultaneously holding both possibilities right now as we meet now in where are we, October of 2024. And I'm entertaining both possibilities without trying to get too attached to one or the other. I could continue to run the business as it is. I could sell some or do multiple exits and stack them over time at different valuations, if that makes sense, or something else. Maybe raise some money from a small angel investor, a family office, or just that a suitable investor that gets our space, isn't looking to exit in 3 to 5 years, and so forth. So back to you.
yeah. So the first thing, if you're looking to exit and break it up in multiple phases, you might as well go with a PE
Oh,
because
that's interesting.
that's mostly their thing. They'll take a big company, break it apart, sell it in pieces,
All right.
and because you'll make more money that way.
Right. Right.
You'll make more money that way. But if you're looking to leave a legacy, you're looking to leave it
Yeah.
for somebody, or you're looking for something to have a stand of time, even if it's 30 years after you're gone.
Yeah.
Family
Yeah.
office, angel investors,
Right.
boards, all that stuff is where you want to play. Acquiring companies, get raising
Yep.
the money, acquiring companies.
Yeah.
That just brings me a question to do ask you, like
Yeah.
with all this going on in your life, are you trying to become a bigger media player than you are now?
That was something that that bolt of lightning struck me about a year ago. And so I've been exploring that possibility, even with my age. I'm like, I've got another 10, 15 in me. I got a lot of energy and very passionate. Um, I'm not attached to it. We could stay just like we are and keep this nice little neat, wonderful culture. I didn't mention that, but I mentioned the team. But it's not easy to build a culture in a business, and we've done that spontaneously and serendipitously. And I got a great team. So I want to protect the people that are on the team. And so the notion, to get to your question, about a year ago struck me, and this is what really launched me into a capital raise and outreach, was to create this Media Capital Ventures, and then uh, look at potential acquisitions of other production companies, bolt-ons, roll-ups. And I even at the beginning, and you'll find this amusing maybe, was looking at companies that weren't really production. They were other things in media, like data analysis of advertising dollars, because it struck me that diversified portfolio would be a good idea. So I was almost thinking like, a portfolio manager, even though that's not, I'm not really made of that, and I don't have the experience of managing other people's money. But I was looking at it just because I'm curious about it and it fascinates me. My sense is that that may not be where we land at the end, but I'm on a journey right now without being too attached to any particular outcome. So I don't know if that's an answer to your question. It may not be, maybe a little nebulous, but
No, no, it
I'm
is.
exploring.
It's kind of, they kind of want to see like your thought process, and I think a lot of
Mhm.
people want to see how your brain works because you've
Yeah,
been doing this for 30 years, and most
yeah,
people are done after 3. You rarely see people last long in media. It doesn't matter if it's podcasting, TV, like what
it's
you have
interesting.
done, music, you have, I
Yeah,
mean, you've been part of a lot.
right.
Like I want to get back to Snack Crackle Pop. That's crazy because that was a big,
Yeah.
yeah, that
Oh
was
yeah.
huge. For a really long time, that was
Well,
huge.
this. Yeah,
And then but
yeah,
like the real question I think everybody want to know is, what
yeah.
mistakes are you seeing that newer people are coming into your space, the entertainment space, the media space, and
Oh,
what
that's
mistake
great.
are you seeing they're doing?
Yeah. Well, I can even share some of my own mistakes, but or missteps and learning adventures. So in well, there's a lot of little levels to this, Kenny. So in the podcast space, um, we serve businesses, clients, organizations that want to use podcasting as a marketing function for their business. The so-called branded podcast, not unlike what you're doing. These are companies that pay us to record, edit, produce, distribute, and monetize if their numbers are big enough. So there's an idea out there. People jump in to work with us, and they're like, how do I monetize my podcast? How do I, just focus on bringing dollars in the door to offset production, and then maybe make a spread if they're fortunate enough to build an audience. It takes time to build an audience. You've been at this a long time, and you know this. But a lot of folks come in and they're like, how immediately they're asking, how do I monetize? So for those people, I don't have a non-answer. My answer is start by inviting people on your show and make it an audience of one approach. Talk to people you want to do business with, bring them on the show, engage, record, celebrate that experience. And many times it will turn into your biggest client. We have a couple of use cases like that. We have a guy up in Northern California who tells the story about his largest consulting client started as a guest on his show. So that can work. And that's a good first line strategy because it takes time to build a real listening audience and begin to monetize in advertising. So that's a mistake. People come in with a misconception about why they're doing it and how it's going to benefit them. It's really a marketing endeavor, unless you're in the pure entertainment space. So I have some more stories about that. We released a wonderful series about a year and a half ago where we interviewed, and I wasn't the host of the show. We were the production company. We interviewed, I partnered with a couple guys that were with Quincy and Michael Jackson when they recorded and produced Thriller. All right. So we got Paul Jackson Jr., we got
Jeez.
all the cats that played on that record
Yeah,
back
you was
in,
part. Wow,
yeah,
Quincy,
yeah.
Michael Jackson during the Thriller, all
Anybody who's
that.
still alive, a lot of them, Bruce Swedeen, who
Yeah.
engineered and recorded everything. He's a brilliant cat. He's been gone for a few years. So a lot of these guys are deceased, but the guys that are still alive, the hosts were Stephen Ray and Anthony Marinelli. Anthony programmed all the synthesizers on the entire record or nearly the entire record. And Stephen Ray worked for Quincy for 5 years and eclipsed that period where they produced Thriller and We Are the World. I mean, he was doing that thing. So these are stories told about guys working on a record. Now, for me, a guy coming in, I thought, wow, you got Jackson, you got the largest selling album ever, and you've got all of this talent talking about the stories. So I thought this would be something as a business endeavor that would be quite profoundly profitable and a really good, and the four of us on the team thought it would. So we recorded about 60 hours of material, video and audio. got millions of views on YouTube. Less so on audio, pure audio, for reasons we understand. And the business is kind of shifting over to video. And we made some runs at some potential sponsors, and for reasons that still remain somewhat mysterious, we weren't able to successfully monetize this series. It's out there. You can find it. It's called Stories in the Room, Michael Jackson's Thriller album. If you just search YouTube, you'll find it. You search any of this, Spotify, and then the rest, you'll
Like,
find it. It's a great series.
so
It
it's
was a
called
great
Stories in the
Stories
Room.
in the
In the
Room,
room,
Michael
Michael
Jackson's career.
Jackson's
Yeah,
Thriller. Oh wow, that's
Thriller album.
amazing to be that you got to be a part of that.
So for me, that's it, Kenny. It was like, oh wow, I loved being a
Yeah,
part of
but
this.
not be able to monetize that is kind of like
It's
it's just
weird.
people just didn't want
Yeah.
it. It's
No,
just
people dig it and they're digging it. But I think what happened is that space is pretty saturated. Like you got
yeah,
a lot of those guys that have already done interviews, and you've got a lot of content that's free.
yeah.
So we have explored like what you're doing with your show, doing a subscription model. And we haven't actually deployed it at this point, but we are having those conversations internally. And we're also talking with some of the so-called podcast networks, to bring it in, and now they can, try to find a way into perhaps some sponsorships. But one of the things I thought about is we didn't create scarcity; we just released it, and I think that was a problem. And in all
And
honesty,
that's the we
I had a
did that
sense
by
of that being,
accident.
yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
did that
You
by
got,
accident. We
yeah.
created scarcity by accident.
Wow,
Yeah.
how did that
Yeah,
happen?
like remember I told you in the beginning would do an hour and 10-minute long podcasts.
Right,
And
right.
it was like 2017, and we maybe had like 700 people listening to the podcast.
All right.
And so basically my partner was like, hey, this is not working, we got to shorten the podcast. So we shortened by 30 minutes. After like a year and a half, people was
Yeah,
like, man, we want more. We want more. I was like,
yeah,
oh, okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
but we never gave them more. We did it once a week, 30 minutes. We got off.
yeah.
Had regular
Right,
jobs.
right, right.
So, and I mean, I was trading. I was like, we really didn't look any sponsor money that we got. We did the ads and it was done. It was not really like major money. It was not like, oh, somebody was paying us like 50 grand to do a year
Right.
long. It was like $1,000 for 2 shows,
Yeah, they were
three
like one
grand.
offs or two offs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
once, yeah,
right,
what I mean, it wasn't anything special. So
right,
during the pandemic, I gave my partner idea to start a subscription business to solve the other problem of the other 30 minutes. So we did 30 minutes on the original Marathon Money, and then we did 30 minutes on Marathon Money Plus. And we launched it December 2020. We thought nobody was going to sign up. That first day, we got 150 signups
Oh,
off
brilliant, man.
off
Bravo.
immediately. Um,
What
it was
platform
pretty,
did you use for the subscription signups? Which one are
man.
you
We
liking?
create Stripe, but we created our own website on WordPress. Still have it. I'm actually
Oh,
revamping
wow.
it now.
Good.
It's called the thing that holds the membership is called Membership Pro, which is pretty much on the WordPress plugin. But ever since, we it grows slowly by slowly.
That's great. But and you were
You know,
driving traffic to the website. So the website was the
yeah,
place where the transactions were occurring.
correct. The website was
Yeah.
the place where the transaction occurring.
And it's a plugin, Membership Pro, and that's how you did it.
Yeah, yeah,
There's another
yeah,
company I found recently called Soundwise. It's
yeah,
mysoundwise.fm or it's IO. Uh, it's one of those. But
yeah,
yeah, no, there's some out of the box solutions for this kind of thing. A plugin on
yeah.
WordPress is cool.
So that was pretty much, we did it by accident. It was two or three straight years where we just
Right,
once a
right,
week dropped 30 minutes and nobody heard
right,
from us.
right,
It was just a podcast. Like we didn't promote it on social media. We didn't really
right,
have social media handles like that. It was
right,
just like,
right,
so
right.
when the opportunity came, so many signed up. So many people signed up in the first month and throughout the year as well. We did pretty good, but now I'm trying to move it over to visually, and I'm trying to take it to a place where I'm interviewing people around the world and traveling to these countries and doing different
So you're
things.
going to do
And
them like in person. You're going to do an
yes,
in-person
so this is kind
thing.
of my ramp up period. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so this is kind of my ramp up here. I'm going to be doing this the whole year, just interviewing people, and then just I guess this is a volume game now until I get to
Wow.
a point
Yeah,
where people know my face. I've done so many interviews,
right.
and then I bring it back to scarcity. That's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah,
that's kind
yeah.
of
So you'll
like
build the platform, and then because you're kind of rinse and repeat is what you're
the
doing. It sounds a
yeah
little bit like the trajectory of Acquired, in a
yeah
different way. That's a long, well,
yeah
that's like a 3-hour show, but at the
yeah
long run. But doing it in person, like they just did at this Chase Center, that
yeah
vibe,
yeah yeah that vibe,
after,
and then
yeah,
kind of just
yeah,
build from there, and then scale it
yeah.
back to scarcity while I'm in other countries and stuff like that, and then
And it's also a lifestyle for you. You'll be
yeah
traveling, you'll be having some
yeah
fun.
and then goal is to build the subscription even more.
Beautiful.
So
Oh
yeah,
man, that's great. Well,
but
I'm learning from guys like you constantly about how to do this better. We're a production company, but we don't have all the answers. It's very interesting. The other thing that's going on and trending. This is a little bit of a pivot. Unless you had another question or another place you
no.
wanted to go. This is your
I want to
show.
hear your pivot. I
This
want
is your show.
I want to hear
Well,
the pivot.
this AI thing is looming out there, right? So we're a production company, and AI is impacting how we think about things. So in audiobooks, we actually are producing audiobooks for nonfiction authors where we clone their voice and then we produce the whole book. And so the good news here is that um, the author narrator doesn't have to spend as much time with us recording. And also the cost of producing their audiobook is profoundly less. And so long term, this could present a situation where there's a lower barrier to entry for authors to get into the audio space with their books, which it's expensive to do an audiobook custom. That's been our business model since the beginning. We spend a series of 90-minute recording sessions with an author, reading their manuscript, and then we do all the post-production required to get it out on Audible, Amazon, iTunes, and there's about 52 or 55 other places they can be to sell it on the retail consumer side. So that's been our business model on the audiobook side. We work with publishers and directly with self-published authors. And so AI is enabling us, as it becomes better and more emotionally connective in terms of the voice generation, we want to lean into that and help authors spend less. And for us, it's still a good margin business for us. And we'll be able to do more of it because fewer authors will say, "Oh, it's too expensive. I can't participate." So that's good news. On the podcast space, it's very interesting because we've been running experiments and now starting to deploy a product where we can generate a script and the interviewer and the author's clone and create a conversation or an interview podcast, all AI generated, which is creepy, scary, beautiful. It's all the things wrapped into one bow. It's quite amazing because what the AI did was, aside from the voice production part, it did that really, really well. What it did was it not only, so you can ingest the full manuscript of a book, or you can just send the table of contents and the introduction, or some subset of the book, and it'll generate great questions and great answers better than we would have done without it manually doing it old school. So we're looking at this and thinking, wow, this is great for book launches where the author won't have to spend any time. Just, we've already got the manuscript, we've got their cloned voice, let's just add this on. So we're starting to nibble in that space as well. Anyway, so these are the ways the AI is impacting our business right away. I thought it'd be interesting to you and your listeners, since
No,
it's kind of a headline.
it's definitely interesting because that's where the world is shifting to. Um,
Yeah,
and it's shifting there fast. And
exponentially. So I know.
at sooner point, we won't be able to see the difference between what's real and what's AI.
Right. And
And
all the political implications of that are, also there. We're
yeah,
just trying to remain really positive. And for me, if we're a company that's about, we can help people connect their voice to the world, that's what we do. We make the way we produce the work we do may substantively change over the next 5 years. And I think if we just hang on to that mantra, the rest of it will take care of itself, as long as we're staying aware of what, market is doing, price sensitivity, quality of the AI, all of those things that's sort of in this mix that we have to really stay sensitive to and aware of, and meet our customers where they need us, kind of thing. So.
Last question before we get off. When you
Right
look
on.
back, what is a decision you made that felt risky at the time, but turned out to be one of your best moves?
Ooh. Um, wow. Well, I've been on the other side of that equation, and that's not the answer you're looking for. But when we did the bagel bed bakery years ago, um, uh, I underestimated the risk. So that's the negative side of your question. The positive side was years and years ago. It actually is not a recent conversation. When I first started my music production company, when I was a young 25-year-old guy, that I went out and bought, at the time, was the premier sampling platform. Now sampling is like, a commodity almost. It fits into every small laptop, and you can have any kind of sample library from musicians that you want. But at the time, this was the thing, and it was called the Syncliver system. Syncliver was a technology that was developed in the 70s and ended up, we mentioned Michael Jackson, and a lot of Lucasfilm used them for post-production. They were an amazing platform for composers and for audio post, just in general, for film. So my wife and I, decided that I was renting time with a studio in Dallas, but I was using the Syncliver a lot for sequencing my music, for bringing, I'd use it in combination with live players and all of that. So at the time, this was a huge amount of money for me. It was a $130,000 investment to buy a Syncliver system and put it in my own studio. So let's just call it 100.5 in it, for a business that we were maybe making $200,000-300,000 a year. Me writing music for these clients, and we took the risk, and the business exploded. And we ended up paying that thing off. It was probably a 5-year loan. We paid it off in like a year and a half, and the rest is history. It was just a beautifully
What
done
was the
thing.
most you made in that music industry?
We had top line revenue. We had one year where we made about 600,000. It's still a small business, arguably, but it was just me writing music. So from that standpoint, it was a pretty good year.
Yeah, no, making 600,000 a year writing music is crazy. What kind
This was
of
in 1993, 92,
was
93,
was
right in there.
like what's your biggest hit that you wrote for? Like what was your
Well,
like
I think okay. So that's a funny question, because I wasn't really in the record business, and that's where you think of hits. Where I was, and I wasn't in a jingle. The business of advertising music wasn't like in a phase where we were writing jingles that everybody knows. It was like Snap Crackle Pop, or for really old guys listening here, if there are any, the Virginia Slim cigarette commercial, which the guy that mentored me wrote. But those days were kind of over. It was more sound design and music scoring when I was in it. But for me as a songwriter, oddly enough, writing for Barney the Dinosaur, I had 45, 50 songs in their catalog, and I had a couple of years where I was doing very well from a royalty standpoint, which is kind of a side effect of this. But these guys had a $500 million, merchandising and music system, clanking it out for pre-K. They really just found product market fit in a way that few entrepreneurs do. And I was working with the creators of that. So being a part of that was the big hit for me.
what do you still receive royalties today from those
Yeah,
songs?
they're not what they were.
Not
There
what
were a
they
few.
yeah, I don't
There
think
were a
they
few, because the product kind of did its
kind of
thing
did.
and had its
Yeah.
inflection, and then it found its place on the shelf. And most of my royalties now, and they're not like anything close to what they were, but they're coming from foreign mechanical and foreign sync rights, because there's
Yeah.
still television using my songs.
Man,
But it's not
like
like, there's a lot of guys out there making a lot more money than I do in
yeah.
music, royalties. But
But
there were a couple
still
years
to
where for me it was big for me.
yeah,
You know.
to be the only person writing for your company and making that significant amount of money as a writer is still amazing as well.
Yeah, it
That
was.
is
Yeah, yeah.
a risk that really panned out for you really well.
Yes, it
Um,
did. And most people and most parents will not encourage their children to go into the music business at all. I had the benefit
the
of parents. My parents were not helicopter parents; they were submarine parents. They let me do my thing.
yeah, music business is really hard to make it, even probably even harder nowadays to make it in any fashion. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
the
yeah.
profitability and the margins just not there
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, no, it
For
was at that time I was played. I know you want to. We want to run here because you're running over time, but I wanted to create a business that it wasn't like a new model. It was the business of advertising music, and in Chicago there were a dozen of these companies. One of the reasons it worked is I went to Dallas and put myself in a small kind of secondary or tertiary market, so I was a bigger fish in a smaller market. Even though we were working on national campaigns like for Frito Lay and stuff, but that was one of the formulas, and the other thing was at that time, and it was winding down, and you pointed to it. Creative guys were paid a premium to write these things. The creative fees were between 25 and 10 grand per jingle, per piece of music for a 30-second spot, plus
30-second
production
spot,
costs.
25
Yeah,
grand. That's not
yeah,
bad.
and a lot of time, and I
Yeah,
worked
to
fast, so
write
I was like 20. Yeah, it was like
to
a 20-minute thing for me, and
to
it was
write a
over pretty quick.
song. It's yeah,
Yeah,
man.
yeah, So
It's
anyway,
not
I
bad.
just sorry. Uh,
Yeah, man. But hey, man, I really appreciate you being on here. I learned
oh,
a lot from you, man. Uh,
likewise.
but we
Yeah.
definitely got to do this again.
Absolutely, Kenny.
Every,
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
anybody who's out there, I know a lot of people that's out there. They have their own podcasts. You're listening. Reach out to David Wolf. He knows what he's doing. He probably can help you get to where you're going.
I'm happy
But
to talk to anybody who will have me, and I have a great team. It's not about me, and that's part of the journey for me is that I got great people with me, and they can help you, and we can help you if you're looking to launch a
yeah,
podcast or you're looking to get into the audiobook. If you're an author and wanting to write a book and
your,
be in and participate in the audio market, that's where our sweet spot.
yeah, your
Thank you.
circle is what take you the furthest. And that's always
Yes,
what I
sir.
always believe. Your circle is always
Thank
what
you.
take you the furthest. But
Yes,
I
sir.
really appreciate you being on. Everybody who's listening, join Marathon Money on YouTube, Spotify podcast, and my Instagram is Marathon Coins. Peace.